Welcome to The Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. Each week we investigate themes of leadership, entrepreneurship, and mindset with some of the greatest minds in real estate. And now, the data scientist of real estate, George Roberts.
Welcome back, investors. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Grant Shipman, founder of Liming-Smith and a leading expert in co-living property management and investment. And with so many real estate investors frustrated at the difficulty of finding properties that'll cash flow immediately, we're actually going to dive into an asset class that not only produces great cash flow for its investors, it's also produced some amazing statistics for our guest today, including a 97% lifetime occupancy rate. So investors, stay tuned for valuable insights on the co-living industry, smart investment strategies, and learn how co-living can address the housing crisis. And if you're wondering whether this works, we're about to talk to a man who went from delivering Domino's pizza to financially free in 24 months. And now our guest, Grant Shipman. Welcome to the show.
George, it's great to be here. Thanks for continuing to host this great podcast. It's an honor.
Thank you so much. And for our loyal listeners, I want to thank you for making the show what it is. You probably already caught the first episode with Grant Shipman, where we delve into a variety of topics, including what co-living isn't, a lot of the basics on co-living. But today we have a very special show. I just read through his 367-page book. Can you hold that up for us? Yeah, right. I mean, don't strain the arm. Love that. Right. Talk about a deal. 367 pages about an asset class that I think even experienced real estate investors may not heard of. So we're going to focus today on the co-living investing and management gold standard. Again, love the gold standard shirt there, Grant.
Thanks.
So maybe the best way to kick it off is I want to say that I love the subtitle to the book. It's what society is in most need of is your fastest path to financial freedom. And I love it because I feel like it speaks to the entrepreneurial spirit and the freedom of a market-based society. I mean, you are out there killing it, but you're killing it because you know how to fulfill a need. So can you start by telling us what is co-living and why is it an idea whose time has come?
Yeah, thanks for the compliment on the shirt. I'm going to pass it on to my wife. I have wisely delegated any kind of fashion stuff out to her. So with co-living, I think a big thing to understand for anyone is like I was talking with this gal named Martha, and I was like, co-living, I mentioned a couple things about it, and I could just see this click in her eye that she knew what it was. But the problem with that click is she didn't know what it was. She thought she knew what it was. And that's the problem with understanding something new is it's so easy to hear a little bit, say, oh, it's that, pigeonhole it and move on. And that's one of the two reasons why those established investors in real estate, everything from buy and hold to note to even my friend who's the largest builder in El Paso, that they miss what co-living is. But to say is co-living, let me say what it's not. Maybe is that a good way to start?
Absolutely. Let's make sure, like I said last time, right? We're not talking about boarding houses. We're not talking about college student living. It's none of that garbage. So let's just throw that out right now. So tell us what it isn't, and then hit us with what it truly is.
Yeah, George is nailing it. So it's any kind of transitional housing that you've been around, from student housing, senior housing, sober living, boarding house, anything like this. That is not co-living way I talk about it, or we'll just call that transitional co-living. But co-living, mainstream co-living, really got going around 2003, even though nobody noticed. It's that when people got tired of living by themselves, even though they could afford to do so. At the same time, they didn't want to sign a lease with other people. So what started happening, really grassroots has just grown, is that a normal house in a normal neighborhood that individuals are renting a room and making a non-traditional household. So it's you know, kind of from the investor standpoint, it's like selling pizza by the slice. You make a whole lot more money for the same, you know, pizza, the same neighborhood house. But from a really cool thing is from a renter standpoint, and I lived this way for 17 years, so I can speak from experiences, I get a big, beautiful house in a nice neighborhood that I can show off to my friends and feel proud of myself. And I'm paying like $700-800 a month, right?
Yeah.
Even when you can afford to do otherwise, people, you know, now they want to use that money to travel. They don't want to have all their money eaten up by their rent or that thing. And a lot of people don't live around family or friends necessarily that they can live with. So these strangers are moving in together. They're feeling safe. They're loving it. They're getting a lot more for a lot less. And that's the mainstream co-living movement that frankly, you know, before, you know, 2003, it just wasn't around. That wasn't a common thing. People renting a room, it just was because they couldn't afford elsewise, you know?
Yeah, beautiful. And you know, I love the way you framed it earlier before we hit record. You said, you know, there might be people who know more about real estate than me, but I'm killing it because I went into this co-living movement, right? I mean, you were, as you described, you're living with hippies, right? A group of
Right.
people who really want this sort of communal living experience. And you got to see, before you really jumped into it, almost 2 decades of experience of what works and what doesn't.
Hmm. Yeah, I had this. So, you know, I put out the first, you know, course in co-living. I started investing in it in 2017. However, back then it didn't even have the name co-living. People thought co-living was like a hostel or something like that. So this movement's so young. It was only about 3 years ago it got the term co-living. But what I had, there's people who'd been investing in real estate, you know, forever before me, you know, and they have, you know, business and economic degrees and all of this stuff. But me getting to live in these housing co-ops with hippies, and I say all of these things in a very praiseworthy note, they've spent decades and even centuries, this tradition of
Right,
building
right.
up. How do,
So people have had communal living. Actually, if I stop you there,
yeah,
I wanted to ask you about Epicurus. Are you familiar with Epicurean philosophy? Is that something that you've ever delved into?
you're gonna see how well my minor in college still plays out. We'll see.
Okay. So is that something like, because when I hear about this, that's what I think of. I mean, I may prefer Stoicism on the one hand, but the idea of buying a house with your friends, sharing ideas, writing books, and living life together, and you know, for the time you do spend working, to make sure that money is all spent on the people you care about. You know, if I was going to sum it up, which I don't have a minor in philosophy, that would be my summing up of Epicurus is that it's all about putting the emphasis in life on your friends
Mm,
and happiness rather than
mhm.
just trying to accumulate. But anyway, I love that. Anyway, if you want to riff on that, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, yeah, what it made me think of was, and by the way, you outdid you know, Dr. Roberts outdid the minor in philosophy from Iowa State University. Because I was like Epicurus. I remember, you know, that's a name, but I forgot what it was. But exactly, that's what's happening. People are prizing experience over, you know, some like, you know, like top unit in a high rise downtown Austin where they live by themselves and they can show this off. People are learning that, hey, if you live by yourself, for once in a while is fine, but over time somebody gets imbalanced. It's not a flex to live alone. What is a flex is to be part of a healthy household. And so what I would add to what you're saying really big is that all of us in real estate investing know that there's becoming more and more renters. We're turning into a renting society, which is fine. It's good or bad. That's how it's happening. But renters are usually not providing co-living houses. They don't know how to do that. It's very rare for them to team up with their friends to buy a house. This can happen, but the big opportunity is for those of us who know how to buy houses. We can provide this kind of housing, and then we have these mainstream renters. Like my average renter stays a little over 2 years, which is what the normal long-term renter stays. But these houses are making, you know, $4,900 to $6,300 a month. So for $4,900 to $6,300 a month. So for us on the investor side, for these kind of the Epicurean spirit coming around, we provide this kind of housing. People fall in love with it, right? They get to live with their friends. They don't have to sign a lease with their friends. Their leases are separate. So, you know, one might move in 6 months and the other one's still there 6 years later. But it becomes just this fantastic, non-traditional household that I think it really fits the current generation, right? The current generation's not anti-family. It's just that the old idea of, you know, where you grow up is where you get married, where you have kids, blah, blah, blah.
People want to go out around the world, right? I mean, this is what I'm writing. This is my book here, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Writing about how, you know, hey, maybe I'm downshifting a little bit here at this point in my life, but I have enough money. I still syndicate apartments. I still offer opportunities to others. But I also invest passively, and I have that cash flow from all of these, you know, from my active and my passive investments. And, you know, you better believe I value, my wife told me a few months ago, yeah, son's got his parking test tomorrow. You know, he's got to parallel park, and I'm not going to teach him that. So in the middle of the day, we were able to just go out. Look, I'll make sure that you get at least one opportunity to parallel park. And we did it a few times in the nearest crowded downtown to our suburb. And, you know, you can't put a value on that. You can't put a price on that. That is just completely invaluable. But I want to ask you, you know, you do mention this trend of people wanting to live together, and I think it is a trend. We also have co-working. That's another huge thing that we see. I mean, we saw a lot of work from home. I wonder, is it social media loneliness? I mean, people spend more time, it seems, scrolling social media these days than they spend actually having a meaningful conversation with people. Do you think that's some of what's going on here? Where do you see this driving?
Yeah, I think, you know, the share economy really got going 2010, 2011. And so the idea of Uber, right, jump into a stranger's car, that used to seem ludicrous. Go stay in an Airbnb, that was ludicrous. Where now the share economy is very normal, and co-living was happening just as strong in the share economy. It just was hard to notice. It wasn't a taxi. It was just a normal house in a neighborhood you would drive by. So yeah, exactly what you're saying. People want to, if the pros outweigh the cons, people would rather live with others. And however, the other side of it is people grew up either with an unhealthy view of household or really no such thing as household. So kind of a cool thing is, you know, renters move in. So I'll tell you about this guy, Kendrick. He moved into one of my first properties in Loveland, Colorado. And he would go out with these other guys he lived with. And he, after about 2 years, he said, hey, guys, and this guy was a civil engineer. So, you know, he goes, hey, I have this great news for you. I'm gonna propose to my girlfriend. And they were like, yay. And they looked back at Kendrick, and Kendrick was like, no, you guys don't get it. Like, yeah, that's neat. I'm proposing to my girlfriend, but anytime I've fallen in love with a girl and then we move in together, it doesn't work out. So I learned, you know, I love my girlfriend so much. I was like, I'm never going to live with her because that's what ruins a relationship. He didn't know how to do healthy household, right? He didn't know how to have healthy conflict, or even that conflict is a sign of growing relationship, and it's a pathway to trust. But he goes, guys, but living here, you know, for almost 2 years now, he goes, I've learned about the 5-on-5. That's the conflict resolution process. He goes, I feel like, no, we really can move in and we can have a great relationship. And the guys were like, well, hey,
5-on-5, because I feel like we can save marriages here. And by the way, we're
right.
3 days before Valentine's Day. So there could be a lot of frayed relationships that need solving around now.
My wife and I, we still use the 5-on-5, which is something I learned, and Sunflower Co-op, which is kind of downtown Austin, Texas. I learned that, and it's this, and they didn't make it up. It's this great thing. And basically, if anybody listening is in co-living, they know that conflict is the co-living killer. Actually, probably $226 million of co-living investment has gone to waste because they didn't know how to handle conflict. But we use this, and me and my wife, we still use, we're like, hey, like she'll say to me, can we have a 5-on-5? And I know what that means, and it works out. And at the end of, I mean, when you have a conflict and you actually work through it, no matter how bad it feels, at the end of it, you're like, I mean, something is different. There is growth. It's wonderful. And so anyway, yeah, what you're saying, I mean, these are just typical tools. Yeah.
Can you give us like in the nutshell, the concept? Like how do you,
yeah.
do a 5-on-5?
Yeah, so this is, the beauty is the simplicity. So 5-on-5 means, so if we were going to do a 5-on-5, I would just ask you, hey, do you have time to do a 5-on-5? And you would either say, yeah, or if you don't have time, you'd say, yeah, but tomorrow or the next day. You would know it's a serious thing. And so when we do a 5-on-5, I'd set the 5-minute alarm on my phone.
Yeah.
And I would get to share for 5 minutes about anything that is on my mind. Now, we're talking about it as conflict resolution, but it could be other things. But say it's conflict, I just share for 5 minutes and you just listen. Now that alarm goes off and it's nice because you don't have to listen for more than 5 minutes, right? And then you set your alarm for 5 minutes, and this is why we call it a 5-on-5. So 5 minutes me talking and then 5 minutes you talking. And that's the whole thing. It's a 10-minute experience. And usually, I mean, 98% of the time, if I got to talk and you got to listen, I felt heard, it just solves it. But then if at the end of it, if either of us, maybe it's me, maybe it's you, feel like, okay, I'm not perfectly fine with it, then we'll say, well, let's do this again in a day or two. And so that's the 5-on-5 process. So that's really all it is.
So there's no immediate rebuttal. You got to agree to a rematch. So I got to say, that's beautiful. I thought you might say something along those lines, because yesterday I was talking to my wife and we were working through something. And I said, do you remember how my grandfather would say that anything you can't say within 20 minutes isn't worth saying? She laughed and she agreed with me. But, later on, she said, where's your grandfather been for the last 20 years in this marriage? So, yeah, I mean, the idea that talking through something completely is very powerful, but we don't always feel heard. I like the idea of 5 minutes. I can talk myself out a lot quicker than 5 minutes. I bet. If you don't say anything, you find people talk themselves out pretty quickly. And at the end, that's huge. That is really huge.
And it's something that is, now we translated it into the property management renter relationship. So, but a big, and some people, like you said, they only take 2 minutes, right? But they get max 5. And, people are thanking their lucky stars for me, because I will talk somebody to death, right? But that 5 minutes it gives me a good amount. It keeps me in bounds. And then in the property management world, what happens is, and particularly anybody who's listening who is into co-living, to really put some rubber to the road on this, is say, George, me and you, we have a 5-on-5 and we talk and all this stuff. And we're like, let's do another 5-on-5. So we can't do it the same day. We have to, let one night pass. And then we do another 5-on-5. And we still say it is that you're leaving your socks in the living room. And that was a problem. But then my dog ate the sock and choked on it and whatever, right? It's always some dumb conflict that we get the most bent out of shape with. And so, so we have our second 5-on-5, and I'm still not happy with it. Then what happens is we ask one other person that we live with. And then, so this is step 3, and there's only 4 steps. Step 3 is we do a 5-on-5-on-5. So we do a 5-on-5 again. And this time, the one other person, they're only there to talk for 5 minutes. They're not our counselor. They're not our mediator. They just talk for 5 minutes. And sometimes that will just solve it. That's the, you know, the very few things, you know, the 98% of things that get past the second step, just bringing in an outside perspective that makes me feel a little bit embarrassed that I'm this bent out of shape about, you know, socks that my dog choked on, whatever. But we do have a very few amount, but I would say it's a 1.5%, between 1 and 2% that move on to the fourth step. And that's when the three of us that were in the 5-on-5-on-5 contact the property manager, and the property manager then comes in and just will either not renew somebody's lease or evict somebody. So there is bite to the bark. And what's the magic about this is that the household takes care of 3 of the 4 steps. The property manager never hears of it. And then the household actually.
I love that. I mean, that's like your egg carton analogy, right?
Yes.
You didn't mention it yet, but try carrying 12 eggs. You can't do it. Use an egg carton. It's trivial. So I think you have something you called a household facilitator. Is that your property manager, or do you have multiple levels?
Yeah, the property manager, you know, our term of property management for co-living is called household-led property management. And so the property manager that's just their name. We only have 1 level. And yeah, they don't live in the house. You know, they manage about 20 houses, 140 leases. So
nice system. Well, then the other question I would have for you is that I think a lot of times you do this with house hacking. So your investors, actually, let's take it back one step. There's many ways you can invest with grants. So one would be, hey, I'm a passive investor. I just want you to, you know, take my money and then give me a check each month. Okay. The other way would be like, hey, I think this is the coolest idea in real estate. I'm going to go, you know, buy your book, buy your coaching, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to actually get my own co-living opportunity. And maybe you'll take on your own investors, for example. And then you could either be living in that space, you could be house hacking and beyond, or you could just simply buy it and then have your property manager be the only line of support. So here,
right.
So I sort of laid it all out there, best of my understanding. Grant, now I want you to clean up that mess.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand it. So you can buy a house and you could live in it as a house hacker, or you could buy a house as an investment property and you just have the manager manage it. Is that right?
So I think you're doing both. Obviously, you're not living in each of the houses that you
Right. Right. So yeah, and this is what's really cool. Some strategies only apply to somebody who's just getting started. You know, they're pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, like me when I was delivering Domino's. It's not that I was delivering Domino's and had, you know, 200,000 in the bank and a 800, you know, point credit score, right? Like I could not qualify for a loan. My lender laughed at me. All right. And I was just doing what Bigger Pockets told me, right? Go find a lender, build your team, right? Everybody's laughing at me. I'm driving my shitty Prius, right? And but this strategy just applies to people in my past shoes, because so we'll talk about a current deal that I'm working on. This is in Jacksonville, Florida. There's a house for $420,000. You can get one for much cheaper if you look and look and look. I just go off the MLS because I don't care. These houses make tons of money. So $420,000 house. If I house hack it, well, first of all, I should say, like, if I bought it as an investment property, so I'm going to cover what I did back then compared to what I do now, and both are options. So what I did back then is this $420,000 house for a 3% down payment, which is, do you think everybody listening, George, understands house hacking, or should we cover that?
Why don't we give a 15-second primer? So what does that entail?
So the beautiful thing here in America and conventional mortgages is if somebody is on a loan that they are a 30-year fixed loan, typically they're on a loan, they only need to put 3% down payment. So a $420,000 house would be a $12.6 thousand down payment. And that's amazing because as an investment property, meaning the person wasn't living in there, they would have to put down $105,000 on this same house with the same 30-year fixed loan. So house hacking gets a lot of people started because they only need, you know, $12,500 compared to over $100,000. So the beauty of house hacking. like cheers to, Craig Curlout, my friend who wrote, house hacking strategies with bigger pockets. He's a big stud. He's coming in town next week, but it's really a great strategy.
Well, that's huge. And I think one of the things you cover in your book is that everybody has strengths. And like not one that you mentioned, but I would say, even if you think, hey, I've got no money, I live in the hood, that could be a strength because you understand an area and a market where getting in doesn't take a whole lot of cash. And if that's your market, boom, that could be your way in. If you're young, you're not married yet, you don't have any children, you can house hack. Some people may be older, they may have careers that keep them really busy, but maybe you can go sign on a loan, maybe you can be a passive investor. Everybody, even if you think that I have absolutely no advantages, you probably have an advantage, right? I think of it like Bob Dylan, right? When you got nothing to lose, right? So the younger you are, the less credit you have. Well, actually, you do have to have credit to have that your primary residence, but even decent credit and being willing to live there, boom.
Well,
you might find yourself the owner of a 4-unit, for example.
Right. Something that when house hacking, and that the book teaches beyond house hacking. This is a term that I made up, and it is a powerful term if people get a hold of it. This is for, I still do this, so it doesn't matter if you can afford a house, whatever, is beyond house hacking is when you bring people together to get to house hack a property for co-living. So what that means is, so with house hacking, you can only get one property every 12 months. That's the mortgage rules. And really ends up being 14 months because of how mortgages work out. But beyond house hacking,
mortgage, you got to season it, and then you've got to apply for your next.
Yeah. What I did, all of my houses up until, oh my gosh, I've done a few DSCRs, and that's a 20-25% down program. For people who aren't.
For everybody that may not know that yet, so debt service coverage ratio, so you're going on the basis of cash flow. That's more like a commercial loan as opposed to these amazing residential loans. Like you pointed out, you might only have to put 3% down.
Right. So this is what I did, which is incredible. So there's a person who we have 4 roles for beyond house hacking. There's primary resident, loan qualifier, money bringer, and the deal manager. These are the only 4 things that you need to have a house that makes, $4,900+ a month. And now these roles could all be filled by one person, George. Like if one person could qualify for a loan and could bring that, $12,000 and could live in the property for the next 12 months and could manage the deal, those 4 roles could all be done by one person. Now, when I started, I couldn't do anything except manage the deal. So I found one person who could move into the house. They couldn't qualify for the loan, but they could be on the loan. They had a 645 credit score or higher. So they could be on the loan. Another person who could qualify for the loan. So they signed for it. They were the loan qualifier. And another person who brought the money for the loan. So they brought $30,000, covered the down payment. We furnished the house, the setup, neato. Now, what's really rad then is this whole, the group of us, the 4 of us, we got a house that was making $4,900 a month. The loan qualifier, we gave $6,000 just for qualifying on the loan. They didn't have to bring any money. So it's like they gave themselves a $6,000 raise that year. And then the primary resident got to live for free. So they saved the equivalent of, $11,500. And the person who brought the money, them and I just split the equity of the LLC 50-50. So we're making out, everybody's making out like bandits, and they love it so much. All of those people want to repeat it in a year. But I, as the deal manager, I can repeat this every single week, right? I just need a new group. And it gets absurd, right? It gets absurd.
The only guy who's doing better than the guy who's living there for free is you.
Right. Well, and actually, in the total return, yes, because I've just got, a half of a property, a $200,000+ stake in a property for nothing. But that person who's living for free, and this is what's really cool, because lots of times they're not as, financially literate, but they have good character, they have good lifestyle. And they're making, this $11,000 savings, so tax-free savings. They don't have to worry about anything. They have no responsibilities except to be a good person. And then by the end of it, they understand what it is to be part of a successful real estate LLC. And they usually end up saving their money, and then they get a property the next year. I mean, it's a really cool thing for everybody. Like, what I say is, for any of us to win, everybody has to win big. It's a really cool setup.
That's huge. If somebody watches this podcast today and they say, like, wow, hey, this is what I want to do, how do they get in touch with you? How do they become an investor?
Yeah, and man, multifamily, right? Like, that's when people got into it, right? Where you do in the pros, right? Oh my gosh, I was studying it because this is like a multifamily in a single family, right?
It is.
So but the best thing is, anybody wanting to learn, curious at all, just go to 𝐋𝐢𝐻𝐿ivingchallenge.com. We do free trainings. We have all kinds of stuff there, because just make things easier, faster, better. But 𝐋𝐢𝐻𝐿ivingchallenge.com, and we've got all the social media, all the everything. I'm just working really hard as far as the book, everything, to put this out there, because people are doing it. And so, but save yourself some pain and go there.
Yeah, save some pain. And I like to say that intelligent people learn from their mistakes. The wise learn from the mistakes of others. At $35, if you're thinking about investing either passively or actively in the space, I would completely recommend go to Grant. I mean, you've got not only the first course and some free material on your website, but also a great book, 367 pages. If that book doesn't save you at least $35, you're probably hopeless. Just give up and go back to the stock market. So you can go to 𝐋𝐢𝐻𝐿ivingchallenge.com. Love it. And that's with a dash. And we'll make sure that that's spelled correctly in our show notes. And want to thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our audience, Grant. This has been a great second round.
Oh man, I love this, George. Yeah, and I mentioned this before the show, but I wanted to say again, is recently the podcast, dropped about your network is your net worth. Like, just being able to know people, but like, when you find passive, this passive income, financial freedom that you help people get to, then we get to like who we get to hang out with, right? This has connected us together. So just to say, 100 thanks back at you. And I will say, for anybody who checks out that book, unfortunately, I'm not great at a lot of fluff and, like little parables and stories. This thing is like, the biggest critique I've gotten is like, Grant, this is just a manual. And really what it's meant to be is somebody can read it, and then as they're doing co-living investing, they can go back to a certain chapter. It's like becomes more like a reference book. That being said, I need to come out with some things that are a little bit more like, fluffy stories, encouraging. And so I'll work on I'll talk with you about getting some notes on how to develop that part of me a little bit more.
Sure. We'll add some hummingbirds and some unicorns to the next edition.
Yeah, I mean, I need that in books, right? I'm saying it in a positive way. I need that in books. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Grant. Excellent episode. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to do a round 3. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, George.